Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon session. Apologies for a late start. We've had a machine die on us at the very last minute, so we've had to quickly find an alternative room that we could do this. So please bear with us for for this. So today with me, we've got Alice McCready. She's sort of the head of compliance within ID Cyber, and then we have Iain, which is her very trusted sidekick and compliance extraordinaire. So today we'll be talking about cyber essentials. We're talking about cyber assurance, and then about the latest part of the Defense Cyber Certification. Now, at the end of this session, there will be some breakouts. So if you want to spend time with any individual person, asking questions and so on, we can feel free and set up a breakout room so you can do one-on-ones and so on afterwards. But feel free to find and ask questions for this afternoon. Okay. So so the first thing that we'll cover this afternoon is about cyber essentials. Now, usually when we cover anything in terms of compliance and so on, cyber essentials is that very first step. Essential steps if you want to become if you want to apply for any grants or so on from the government and so on for your organization, they may ask for your cyber essential certificate. Okay, so where did all this start? So it all starts with the National Cybersecurity Center. Okay, so with the Cybersecurity Center, they are in control of the entire scheme, of the question set, how the questions should be answered, and and so on. And really, this kind of sets a standard for all certifications with regards to Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. IASME, on the other hand, is the chosen delivery partner for the National Cybersecurity Center with regards to cyber essentials and cyber essentials plus. So IASME takes care of all the day-to-day things, from managing the questionnaire, the online portal on how to fill in the answers, to submitting it, and so on. Great so far. Then you get certification bodies. Now, there are loads of certification bodies within the United Kingdom that work with IASME, and we're merely one of those certification bodies based in Scotland, but we do certifications worldwide. Okay, so as I said, we're based in Scotland, in Glasgow. So if you're close by, feel free to pop in. Okay, so now, if you are going through Cyber Essentials, it is generally a self-assessment that you complete, and it's got a whole bunch of questions, in it, and it is marked by a qualified assessor. All right, so both Alice and Iain are some of our complement of qualified assessors that can mark your assessment. Now, some of you may ask, I heard about Cyber Essentials Plus, right? So basically, it is everything in the self-assessment that we've talked about, or that you've answered the questions about, and it's about a assessor going through the audit and physically verify this on devices and systems and so on. Now, normally, when you go through Cyber Essentials Plus, you need to complete that within 3 months of doing your self-assessment, okay? Because each of these is an assessment in point of time, which means that, so the maximum time between one and the other can be 3 months, because if it goes more than that, the time difference becomes too much, and too many things could have changed in the cyber essentials or in the cyber environment within your organization. Okay, now that we've got that out the way, now the cyber essentials certification lasts 1 year. So it's an annual assessment that you need to go through. It's pretty straightforward. Once you've done the self-assessment, you'll get the hang of things, how to progress and so on. So what else can we do? Well, the Cyber Essentials covers 5 key controls. Okay, so these are the 5 main topics, if you wish, that is in Cyber Essentials. So they cover, for example, firewalls, secure configuration, security update management, and that is things like patching and so on. Then we have user access control. And it's like all of these things is about, how do we grant access to folks, to systems and so on. So making sure that's okay. And then the most important thing out of all this is malware protection. Does it work? Does it get updated regularly? And so on. Okay, so it covers a whole range of questions based on these topics. Now, before you decide, oh, right, these are just random questions. No, they're not. These questions are based on previous hacks that have occurred. Okay, so each question there is basically asking, have you fixed this issue? Have you prevented a hack from occurring with this issue? And it goes through all of the stages that you need to go through. Now, when we going through all of this, there is some help for you as the applicant if your business is going through Cyber Essentials. And they set out, the National Cybersecurity has set out a guide for everybody else. So basically, it's called the Requirements for IT Infrastructure. And in this document, it describes every single bit of the questionnaire. It also has a handy diagram for you to follow to see what is in scope, what is out of scope, and it'll give you some clarification on what bits do we need to actively working on and so on. Fortunately, the document is easily available. It can be downloaded directly from the National Cybersecurity Center, and we'll post some links at the end of this webinar. And it can also be downloaded from IASME's website, and it can also be downloaded from our own website, which is cyberessentials.online. Yeah, dead easy. So, as we're coming up to the end of the current certification cycle, which is on the current Willow question set, at the end of April, there is a new version of the questionnaire and the requirements for IT being released. Okay, so that'll be, the question set will be Danzel. Yes, I know. Lots of questions about whether the Z is silent or not, but there's also a requirements for IT version 3.3 coming at the end of April. I think the date for that is the 29th of April. Okay, so big dates in terms of Cyber Essentials. Now, the requirements is that it doesn't change very much from Willow to Danzel. But it is just a pure progression from, keeping things updated, making sure everything is quality tested and so on. So there's loads of things that you can have a look at. So under the very first control is firewalls. Now, there can be, we can say loads of things about firewalls. However, As for Cyber Essentials, we're only interested in whether the services are there, they're implemented, and whether they are managed. So, for example, imagine you get a brand new device from either the vendor, or you buy it online from Amazon or your favorite vendor. So it will come with a default password. Okay, so in this, we want to make sure to say, hey, there is a default password. Did you change it perhaps? So make sure you change it away from the default admin password, or the default password that that the vendor may have said, because we don't want other folks to guess that. Great, fantastic. Um, the next option is to prevent internet access to the firewall configuration interface. You know that bit where you log in and go make changes to the firewall? Yeah, we don't want that exposed to the internet. And there's usually a little tick, just a checkbox to say, hey, don't expose this to the internet. So we will just want to make sure it's okay. Right. So other things, if there is a option to enable multi-factor authentication, great, we're good to go. Or alternatively, if you're working with a managed service provider, you can put their IP address in the allow list to get access to the control panel. Okay, so far so good. So what are we actually checking on the firewall? Okay, so basically, we want to make sure that when there's incoming traffic from the internet into our network, anything that is not authenticated, beat it, go away. Okay, you're not allowed in. However, we want to make sure that if we have any inbound rules to allow traffic coming in, that they are subject to approval and documentation. So why did we put them in? When did we put them in? How long do we expect to have this rule in for? Okay, so it's just a little bit of maintenance. And then the last point, or the last points, in this is, if we need to make changes, can we make a change, right? And also on software firewalls, this is the firewall on your local workstation, right? So if your local workstation has a firewall setting up, is it enabled? Yes. If you're using a Mac, comes disabled by default. So just make sure that is enabled, for example. Okay. So fairly straightforward things, not very technical things, but it's just making sure it makes it really, really hard for other folks to mess with our system. Now, with secure configuration, again, it's just making sure that devices are set up in such a way that only the services are available for somebody to do the job. Okay, so for example, remove and disable unnecessary user accounts. Okay, so there may be machines that have been living for a while, so they may have a guest user. We certainly don't want the guest user. There may be other accounts that have been created on the device. We certainly don't want them, because if they're not for the current user, it doesn't need to be there. If there are any default passwords, again, just like in the firewall bit, we want to make sure that we've changed the passwords to a really good password. So we'll come back to that. The big thing is, what happens when we buy a new machine? Yeah, hop into Curry's, pay our money, get our shiny new machine. It comes with loads of stuff installed. Okay, so we just need to make sure that for any software and services that we are not using, any trialware and so on, we get rid of all of that. And if you're an established business already, has the machine been set up in such a way that it has access to all of the software bits that you're using for your daily job? Okay, so yeah, is there everything there that I can do? in terms of auto run and autoplay, this is a hangback from way back when, from Windows XP, when you can just insert a DVD and the program would automatically run. Or if you insert a USB stick, it will automatically run the programs on there. So from Windows 10, 11, so on, that is usually disabled by default, but the check is there to say, hey, just make sure that auto run and autoplay is turned off, because you don't want somebody just to shove a stick in and something would happen to the device. Right, cool. The next three things is about who can access systems and how can they access systems. So for example, do I need to type a username and password before I can access stuff? Yes. Excellent. Right. So I would also need to then look at the second last option there. It's like appropriate locking controls for physically accessed devices. Okay, how am I gonna get access? Is the keyboard? Yeah, what happens if I type? Am I gonna be prompted for a username, password, or a PIN? Fantastic. What if it's a mobile phone? You're right. So am I going to be prompted for a PIN or authentication to log in? Yeah. And what happens on the last point if somebody's trying to guess my password? They're trying to log into my system and they don't know the password. How many guesses are we going to allow them to have? And is there something else we can enable, like, for example, MFA, multi-factor authentication, where they have to authenticate via another device, for example, so it can give you a clue. But usually we want the maximum tries to be maximum 10 guesses in 5 minutes. Now, I know it's quite generous, but hopefully your password won't be guessed within a 10 guesses within 5 minutes. Okay, so if it's a corporate device, the device gets locked after 10 unsuccessful attempts. Okay, so then an administrator needs to unlock that. So far, fairly straightforward, easy, because we're just trying to limit folks from breaking into our machines. So what else can we do? Right. Security updates. Yes, it's coming up for Patch Tuesday. Oh, no, actually, it's coming up for the cumulative update at the end of the month. Patch Tuesday is another 3 weeks, 3 weeks to go. Now, Patch Tuesday, for example, is a major day where Microsoft releases a whole range of patches for your systems and so on. Don't defer them, install them. Okay. So making sure that if there's an update for an application, a system, the operating system, anti-malware, anything like, if it's available, please install it. Now, the requirement for Cyber Essentials is that you install the updates within 14 days. Okay, so it gives you a bit of time to go and see what the patch is about, read about it, what is it going to fix. But any patch that is labeled critical or high risk, they need to be put in within 14 days. Okay, so far we can see that there's lots of things that we need to do. The problem comes in if I have software that's no longer supported. Well, if it's no longer supported by the vendor, I am not going to get updates. So that's a bad thing. That's a really, really bad thing. Okay, so I want them to be able to update, maybe get a new version of the software. So I need to then decide within my organization, say, okay, this application has become unsupported. What are we going to use in the meantime? Or what are we going to switch to? Now, these obsolescence don't just happen instantaneously. For example, last year we had, during October or so, we had loads and loads and loads of warning that Windows 10 is becoming end of life. So we had loads of time to plan for that. Okay. Don't be the ones that leave it to the last minute. Okay. So, right. Okay. So the access control. So here we want to be able to see, Okay, who has access to our systems? Okay, so who are they, right? So are these people that have um, um, accounts assigned to them because they are an authorized individual for the organization? Okay. Do we decide what access do they get to which applications? For example, if you have cloud applications or information stored in a cloud like a CRM system, right? So the process goes along the lines like this, right? So um, knowing who has access or who can get access to stuff, who is going to approve that account? If it's an admin account, are you tracking that adequately? Because you don't want to forget that somebody's got an admin account. You want to make sure nobody's got a shared account. When an account is no longer required, that we get rid of it. Because in a cloud service, well, you may actually pay for that seat to get access. So it may save you some money as well. Okay, so if people have an account, what privileges do they have? And do they get reviewed when no longer required? Unfortunately, if the cloud service supports multi-factor authentication, good thing to have it turned on. All right, the same thing, because we don't want people to brute force access to your cloud service. You want them to be stopped as best as you could. The last thing here is about choosing strong passwords and by giving advice to employees on how to store and generate passwords. Now, there's a big thing that some folks are going to say, no, you cannot write the password down. Actually, you can. Just don't leave it on a post-it on your monitor or under your keyboard. That's a bad thing. If you write it in a book and lock it up in a drawer, that's perfectly okay. Nowadays, password managers are way easier than this. Okay, so fortunately, technology moves on. Soon, we won't even have to worry about passwords anymore because we're going passwordless and we're going to rely on pass keys. Now, I know your reluctance on things, but how am I going to remember? The whole point is that you don't need to remember. It is a cryptographic key that you use to decrypt your account. So it's going to become a whole lot easier for you as the individual, for you as the business to keep track of accounts and keep them safe. Okay, so what else? Yeah, viruses. We all love them. Oh, no, we don't. Okay, so we want to be able to have systems in place to say, hey, everything that's installed, make sure it's not malware. Okay, so and we really, really advise that we install malware, not malware, anti-malware, excuse me. Malware is for the other guys that we're trying to protect from. So, but we want to be able to do this on servers, desktops, laptops, and so on. Any device that is there that has data, we want to be able to protect those particular devices. And if we are going to install anti-malware, make sure it's up to date. Okay, so now you don't have to do, if you're running Windows, you don't have to do something radically different. Windows Defender is more than capable of protecting your Windows device. You don't have to go out and buy McAfee or Norton antivirus or anything else like this, right? So the adequate ones comes in. For example, on Mac OS as well, you have Xprotect. It silently works in the background, but I would really suggest that for Mac OS that you maybe look at alternatives as well, just to make sure. But the thing is, it comes in, it's built in. You just need to check if it's working and turned on. Right. So, in short, make sure that all of the devices in your scope that you said is going to be covered by Cyber Essentials. You must have things installed. who makes those decisions? Okay, so if somebody needs to install something, is there approval required for something like that? Yeah. So just make sure it is controlled. Okay. So that is a huge amount of stuff that we've talked about in Cyber Essentials. This is, it's a huge whistle-stop tour. Now, briefly on Cyber Essentials Plus. Now, we have mentioned that with Cyber Essentials Plus, it is a technical audit of your Cyber Essentials self-assessment. Okay. So which means basically we're going to check, is the antivirus up to date? What is your password policy? We're going to check the password policy. We're going to check and see whether all the updates are installed and so on. And the assessor may look at a sample of devices, including mobile devices that are being used by the organization for the organization to access data. Okay, there'll be a vulnerability scan, just making sure that there isn't something you've missed or anything else like that. You will get a full report on that vulnerability scan to say, hey, did you know, you can fix all these other things as well. So there is a good list. Part of the test as well, check your email, and we'll go through a process where the assessor will send a set of test files to your device and then evaluate how your system deals with malware. They're not real malware, but they are specifically designed to trigger all of the tests and so on to see how does it work. Okay, so at least whew, if somebody was going to send me some malware through email, I'll be okay. Okay, so now, fortunately, my bit's done, and I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Alice and Iain to take you through the next steps.
Thanks, Cary. So Cyber Essentials is very much focused on your actual devices and the kind of technical policies that you have in place. But Iain and I are going to talk now about some of the other standards that exist that look more at your kind of general organizational policies and documentation. So IASME Cyber Assurance is the first of these that we're going to talk about. You might remember the word IASME because, as Cary said earlier, that is the delivery partner for Cyber Essentials. So they've gone and developed a standard that it's very focused on general organizational resilience. So it's quite an in-depth standard. It covers a lot of the same content as ISO 27001. So if that's the standard that you're looking to move towards in the future, then this could be a good starting point. It also aligns to organizational size. So if you are a micro or a small organization, some of the questions in the standard don't apply to you and are automatically removed from the question set that you will be facing. So you don't have to struggle with the not applicable side of things. In terms of the actual assessment and what they look like, so there are two levels. Level 1, like with Cyber Essentials, it's a self-assessment that you yourselves fill out, that then someone like Iain or myself would then mark. And that certification lasts for 1 year. Level 2 is then where is basically Cyber Essentials Plus, and we basically come in and then audit your organization against what you've said in your self-assessment. So we are reviewing all of the documentation that you should have in place. We are looking at video share or screenshot evidence of your policies, and we're also interviewing your staff, both your senior staff who are actually putting these policies into place and deciding what is appropriate for your organization, but also more junior staff who should just to kind of go, are you aware what your role is? Are you aware what your responsibilities are? Just to make sure that your resilience and security policies are fully embedded throughout your organization. Obviously, that level 2 audit is quite a bit more in depth, and the audit normally takes a couple of days. So because of that, the level 2 certification lasts for 3 years.
And like Alice was saying there, protect, detect and deter, and respond and recover. So going through the level 2 audit, we'd be looking at, like you were saying there, hearing from senior staff, perhaps there's an appropriate budget in place for and planning for cybersecurity, seeing items from a meeting agenda. We'd look to see some asset registers, perhaps some risk registers, learning about some of your monitoring as well, whether you've got a security operations centre, and looking at things like backups. Are these not only taken at regular intervals, but also stored appropriately and regularly tested? And it could also be things like discussing your business continuity plans as well and disaster recovery.
And then the next standard we're going to very quickly touch on, it's a brand new standard. It only came out, I think, in November. So it's a very, very new standard called Defence Cyber Certification. Cary, next slide, please. Thank you. So Defence Cyber Certification, or a DCC, this is owned by the Ministry of Defence, but otherwise the delivery pattern is very similar to Cyber Essentials, with IASME again being the delivery partner and organisations such as ourselves being your certification body. It is aimed at UK defence suppliers. So anyone involved in any kind of MOD defence contract would this would be relevant for them. The aspects here, so the entire standard aligns to Defence Standard 05138 issue 4. Yes, it's very catchy, which is focused on organisational resilience. Now, DCC, if you're involved at all in the defence sector, then to date, you will have had to fill out supplier assurance questionnaires, or SEQs. That system is still in place, but while you would need an SEQ for every contract you're involved with, DCC has been developed by the MOD to try and streamline that process, so that if you had, say, 5 or 6 contracts, you didn't have to do 5 or 6 SEQs. You instead just have to complete DCC once. And it lasts 3 years as well. So it's the attempt to kind of streamline that process. And while Cyber Essentials is very much just looking at the aspects that are internet facing and dealing with your internet traffic, the DCC scope is wider, but it's only relevant to those aspects that are critical to your business and, if relevant, the defence contract. So there might be aspects of your business that you kind of decide, you know what, the business would still exist. It might look slightly different, but it would still exist, and we could still deliver the defence contract, and therefore we will exclude it from the scope of the DCC assessment.
So there are 4 levels to DCC, inconveniently titled 0, 1, 2, and 3. These tend to correspond to the Cyber Risk Profile, or CRP, which is set by either the MOD or the contracting organisation. This could be like your prime. But the MOD or your prime could set you out to achieve level 0, and that would be enough. But you as an organisation can decide, do you know what, actually, I think in future I would like to be able to go for level 1. So you can make that commitment to go for a higher than required level of DCC. We, as a certification body, currently deliver levels 0 and 1. Cyber Essentials is a prerequisite for all levels of DCC. However, Cyber Essentials Plus is a prerequisite for aiming for levels 2 and 3.
So when we're looking at level 0 is for the organisations where there is a very low level of assessed cyber risk to the organisation who is delivering this defence contract. So it's very much seen as a foundational level, covering the basic measures. So as Iain says, one of the prerequisites is Cyber Essentials itself. So one of the controls here is checking that you have a certificate in place, and that you are committing to maintaining that certification for the length of your defence contract. Or really any functions that kind of relate to the contract. The second control is about ensuring compliance with UK GDPR regulations. So here we want to hear about the processes and policies that you have in place to support compliance with GDPR, and things like, do you carry out DPIA's data protection impact assessments for the data that you store or process? And then the final control is about resilient networks and systems. Now, the focus here is on the word resilient. So here we'd be expecting discussion of risk assessments, for example, covering the critical aspects of the business, and evidence of concrete actions taken to ensure security and the ability to restore as needed.
Level 1 would be for organisations that are deemed to have a low to moderate level of assessed cyber risk to suppliers delivering the contract. There are 101 controls for level 1, so I won't list them all. I mean, I think that works out around about 200 to 350 questions, I think, in total. But they fall within these 4 main categories. So that's objective A, managing security risk. That could be for things like risk management, funnily enough, asset management, supply chain and physical access. Objective B, protecting against cyber attack. That is by far the largest of the controls here. So that would be things like your least privilege, password management, VPNs, removable media, data protection, encryption, anti-malware, security vetting, etc. You'll notice how some of that aligns quite well with Cyber Essentials. Objective C is how you create, retain, correlate logs, audit logs, etc. And then objective D, minimising the impact of cybersecurity incidents. So that would be your recovery planning, incident handling, and lessons learned from an incident.
Finally, this is just a list of resources that you might find useful for everything that we've talked about today. So if you just want to get started with your CE or CE+, then you can get in touch with us through cyberessentials.online. IASME have also developed a knowledge hub, which is really very useful for everything relating to Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. So they've got articles in from, on there for scoping, for example, lots of information on all the supported operating systems, supported applications, clarification on the various key controls. Essentially, it's just a lot of questions that they've had over the years that they've just built into this knowledge hub. So I'd really recommend taking a look at that, especially if you're near the start of your Cyber Essentials journey. And IASME have also released several free templates for documentation. So if you're interested in cyber assurance or even just want to basically enhance your organisation's documentation, it's a great resource to look at. They've got free templates for asset registers, risk assessments, admin trackers, all those kinds of useful things.
Thank you.
And that concludes the webinar portion of today.